On Terra, in the very heart of the Imperium, the Emperor once created warriors who surpassed all his other servants in discipline, power, and honor. They were named the Astartes and became the proud protectors of humanity. The legions of Astartes, formed in the distant past, were magnificent warriors, prepared to undertake the most complex and dangerous missions. Trained by strict mentors and having undergone the harshest trials, they are exemplary figures of uncompromising discipline and will to victory. Each of them is a hero whose martial spirit and mastery of weapons enable them to achieve victories even in the most hopeless situations. The armor and weapons of the legionaries, created from the strongest materials and often unique, allow the Astartes to survive in the fiercest and most dangerous battles while they deliver decisive blows to the enemy. But it is not just strength and skill that make the warriors of the Astartes legions so unique. They all follow a strict code and principles that determine their behavior both on and off the battlefield. They all are ready to sacrifice their lives for the Emperor and humanity, and their honor and loyalty have never been questioned. However, even among the mighty warriors, there are those who are first among equals, the honorary guard of the Astartes Legion. The honor guards consist of the elite warriors of the Legion, and their skill in weaponry, as well as their strength and devotion to the Primarch, have been tested time and again. Each of the legions during the times of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy had units that served as the bodyguards of the Primarch and the honorary guard of the Legion. The First Legion, the Dark Angels, with their elite unit, the Death Wing. Despite the fact that the Death Wing is an active unit in the 42nd millennium, being an elite unit in the First Company of the Dark Angels and other Unforgiven, its roots trace back to the early days of the Great Crusade. Once the First Legion was reunited with their Primarch on the green death world of Caliban, Lionel Johnson introduced the Terran Legionaries to the organizational structure used in the Order of Caliban. The principles of loyalty, discipline, and self-efficiency instilled by Lion were universally adopted by the legions. Under the watchful eye of the Primarch, his legion was divided into several formations known collectively as the Hexagrammaton or the Six Wings. These specialized formations operated under an unusual chain of command and organizational structure within the legion. The structure of these units represented a blend between the old, long-forbidden martial traditions of Terra and the customs of Caliban. Before the formation of the first Space Marine legions, the existing Astartes were organized into the so-called Six Hosts of the Angels of Death, each with its own specialization. In the likeness of these hosts, the Primarch created the Six Wings of the First Legion, one of which became the Death Wing. The Death Wing order consisted primarily of cataphract terminators, the armored elite of the Legion, specializing in sudden assaults and strategic decapitation strikes. The Death Wing was originally formed from the fragmented remnants of the Warriors of Corona, a unit that emerged in the early days of the First Legion and was renowned for its breakthrough squads and marksman detachments. Those from the inner circle of this force who survived the tragic incident that brought it to the brink of destruction vowed that no member of their Hexagrammaton wing would ever leave the battlefield and would accept death, instead of the dishonor that would stain a warrior if they retreated. However, besides the Hexagrammaton, the Dark Angels Legion had another structure, the Hecatonistica, which was known to almost no one outside the Legion and even within it. Most members of the Hecatonistica formally belonged to the Death Wing, but were initiated into far more terrifying secrets of the Legion and essentially acted as covert autonomous units within the Legion. The Hecatonistica also originated on Old Terra and translates from the language of the fractured lands of Meccan as the 100 Esoteric Arts. The term used by Hecatonistica to denote the secret military orders embedded within the formal structure of the Legion, whose members could belong to any wing and specific detachment. Each such order dedicated its life to protecting one of the hard-won shards of secret knowledge, most often concerning the weakness of a particular enemy or the secrets of wielding a specific weapon. Members of these orders were equally scholars and warriors, theoreticians and practitioners, lethal combatants on the battlefield, and enigmatic figures in the halls of the Legion. Although these warriors rarely gathered in one place, some members of different orders met before important battles to form a temporary combat group known as the Knights of Sinopium. The knights often led the assault or served as advisors to senior officers of the Legion. Most members of the Hecatonistica once belonged to the Order of Broken Claws, one of the oldest secret orders of the Dark Angels. This order appeared during the Unification Wars and lasted almost until the end of the Great Crusade. During the Wars on Terror, members of this order were unparalleled duelists who could identify the leader of the enemy force in open combat and execute him. All members of the Order of Broken Claws practiced a series of secret dueling arts that were once common in the long-forgotten cults of Old Terror, but have now almost disappeared. Most surviving warriors of the Order of Broken Claws were integrated into the Firewing and Deathwing with the reformation of the Legion, whose doctrines perfectly aligned with the teachings of the vanished order. However, if rumors are to be believed, the former mentor of the Order was honored to join the inner circle of the Dreadwing. Together with other Legion units, the members of the Deathwing conducted numerous successful covert operations, especially in conjunction with the more numerous Stormwing. The most renowned warriors of the Deathwing were its many veterans, the elite heavy infantry that breached gaps in enemy ranks for other wings of the Hexagrammaton, or acted as rescuers sent to protect besieged officers of the First Legion. In later years, it was the detachments of the Deathwing that became the guardians of their Legion, serving in garrisons of the Inner Circle citadels on Caliban, or protecting their Primarch, acting as his honor guard. The best among the Deathwing veterans, those who had served the longest, formed the ranks of the so-called Companions of the Deathwing, and swore to ensure at all costs the survival of the officers under their care. The most famous and revered among the Companions were those who had taken a deadly blow intended for their wards and survived. Such warriors were granted the right to wear white armor as a sign of their absolute dedication to the Legion. Over time, the authority of the Deathwing only grew. Considering the strict requirements for admission even into the outer circles of this wing, its members were few, but their word carried significant weight. Deathwing warriors often assumed command when a current leader was killed, and there was no one among the warriors more authoritative than they. As Horus's heresy engulfed more and more of the Emperor's domains and losses affected the officer ranks of the Dark Angels, the Deathwing warriors increasingly took command, gradually assuming a dominant position in the Legion and the Council of Masters. The bird from ancient Terran myth, known as the Phoenix, was a powerful and revered symbol for the Legionnaires and served as an example of the Legion's all-encompassing striving for perfection. Drawing inspiration from this symbol, Fulgrim founded the Phoenix Guard, whose members were his personal bodyguards and honor guard. When the Legion was not fighting, the guardsmen played the role of a ceremonial guard and sacred aquilifer. Their appearance amazed all those who saw them, proud warriors in skillfully crafted and polished armor with Korean engravings, adorned with fluttering oath scrolls and gilded weapons, truly demonstrated the perfection to which the Emperor's children aspired. On the battlefield, the Phoenix Guard was no less impressive. Surrounding their Primarch with an impenetrable steel ring, the guardsmen killed anyone who dared challenge Fulgrim. The Phoenix Guard consisted of 200 warriors, featuring both assault squads and veterans from tactical units. However, its most terrifying force was the Terminators in Tartarus armor, armed with Phoenix power spears, deadly blades created in the likeness of the Custodians' power halberds. The Phoenix Guard participated in numerous campaigns of the Third Legion. However, all its members were killed on Tarsus World during a battle with the Eldar. Already under the influence of chaos, Fulgrim established a new Phoenix Guard, which accompanied him to meet Horus, during which the Primarch finally renounced the Emperor and began serving the Dark Gods. Members of the Phoenix Guard were also on the flagship of Ferrus Manus, where, after a failed attempt to sway the Primarch of the Iron Hands to the side of the War Master, they dealt with his Morlock bodyguards. The last time the Phoenix Guard was seen was during the Battle for Terra. It is possible they still exist today. guarding the Primarch on his demon world, which they now call home. The Tyranthikos, also known as the Dominators, were an elite assault unit of the Iron Warriors during the Great Crusade. Clad in Terminator armor, each was a veteran of numerous bloody sieges and a skilled warrior. Each grand battalion had a unit of Tyranthikos, and the Primarch Perturabo used them as his personal guard. However, during the Battle of Fall, the Tyranthikos failed to hold back the boarding party of the 7th Legion, which managed to penetrate so far as to reach the Primarch's inner sanctum. After this, all members of the Tyranthikos were demoted, and Perturabo found himself a new honorary guard. Deciding that his sons had failed him, the Primarch used forbidden mechanicum knowledge to construct new combat mechanisms based on the Domitar and Conqueror automata, known as the Domitar Ferrum. Perturabo's new guard became known as the Iron Circle and consisted exclusively of automata telepathically linked to the Primarch. The Lord of Iron believed his new guard to be not only stronger and more resilient than the previous one, but also, unlike many of his sons, loyal only to him. Throughout the Horus Heresy, Perturabo continually modified and improved his Iron Circle and began dispatching automata to the Grand Battalions, where they eventually replaced the Tyranthikos warriors. However, among the legionaries of the 4th Legion, there were rumors that the silent constructs were sent by the Primarch not only as reinforcements, but also as spies, who reported the failures of the Iron Warriors and identified potential traitors. The 5th Legion, White Scar's elite unit, the Keshig. The first members of the Keshig were recruited on the planet Chogoris, with Jagatai Khan himself, when he had not yet led his legion, but was merely trying to survive on the inhospitable planet. Jagatai Khan quickly assembled brave warriors around him, the best of whom he made his personal guard, and set out to conquer. Conquering one tribe after another, the Khan also increased the number of loyal warriors whom he led to further conquests. Jagatai Khan's reputation as a just but ruthless man quickly spread across Chogoris, and new settlements approached by the young Khan's army increasingly surrendered without a fight and pledged their loyalty to him. Jagatai valued those who voluntarily chose to join him and selected recruits for his Keshig from such people, guided not by the ancient bloodlines of the recruits, but by their skills and loyalty to the Khan's ideals. Over time, the entire planet was united under Jagatai's iron hand, and he received the title of Khan, Khan of all Khans. Shortly after the completion of his conquests on Chogoris, the Emperor of Mankind arrived to forever alter the fate of the Primarch of the 5th Legion. After reuniting with his legion, Jagatai Khan elevated his Keshig, sending most of its warriors to various companies so that they could spread his teachings and set an example for the legionaries recruited from Terra. The remaining part of the Keshig stayed by the Primarch. Clad in Terminator armor and armed with power sabers and glaives, they became the Primarch's shield and his striking sword. The Keshig, apart from the veterans in Terminator armor, also included two separate units, the Golden Keshig and the Eben Keshig. The Golden Keshig, unlike their other brothers, did not wear Terminator armor, but were clad in regular but heavily modified power armor and primarily fought mounted on jet bikes. All of them were once skilled riders, and upon becoming Space Marines, they took to the bikes and were assigned as breakthrough units. Their tactics were merely adapted to the new conditions of the mounted warriors of Chogoris, who often wearied the enemy by circling around them before simultaneously rushing to the center of the enemy formation, breaking it. Such attacks, both then and now, usually served to disrupt the enemy's ranks and sow confusion in their lines. The maneuverability of the Golden Keshig warriors also allowed them to lure enemies into traps or open areas where there was no cover that could save them from the furious onslaught of the White Scars. The terror that the Golden Keshig warriors instilled in their enemies led to them being called storm ghosts or sky beast tamers on various worlds. The latter nickname was especially common on less developed and wild worlds. The warriors of the Ebon Keshig, unlike the other legionaries, wore black, not white armor, and were not a guard but a collection of criminals atoning for their sins and stained honor. Legionaries who joined this Keshig were most often used not as an honor guard but as the vanguard of breakthrough forces, and they were also sent into the bloodiest battles so that they could serve as living shields for the other legionaries. In battle they redeemed their sins, not only with their martial glory but also by the protection of their brothers, and those legionaries who survived their service in the Ebon Keshig, in the eyes of the other White Scars, were granted forgiveness and considered warriors once more. Upon their return they often went back to their old posts, but they sometimes received new positions. The 6th Legion, Space Wolves, an elite unit of the Varagir. The Varagir, sometimes referred to in Imperial records as the Wolf Guard, were the chosen warriors of Leman Russ, personally selected by him from his great company. These warriors became the honor guard of the Wolf King, as well as his close comrades and advisors, both in war and in peace. After the Emperor's arrival, these warriors, akin to the members of Jagatai Khan's Keshig, were elevated and took their place beside the Primarch. Despite their venerable age, they nonetheless underwent the genetic modifications necessary to become Astartes. While some of them perished, most of the Varagir survived, becoming Space Marines. Thus they became the first Varagir of Leman Russ, swearing to follow their lord wherever he might go, even if it meant leaving the world of ice and blood behind and ascending to the stars. The king valued his Varagir for their loyalty, and although they were inferior to the Terran warriors of the 6th Legion, who, despite their reputation as brutal and ferocious fighters, had yet to prove themselves as worthy warriors and had not earned the respect of Leman Russ. Upon assuming command, Russ partially dispersed the Varagir among the other companies of the 6th Legion, which caused some dissatisfaction. But the warriors of the Honor Guard quickly proved in several duels that the orders of the Wolf King should not be questioned. After the successful campaign known as the Wheel of Fire, the old 6th Legion ceased to exist, as it was bolstered by a large number of Fenrisians and reforged in the crucible of war. For the surviving Terran legionnaires, Fenris became a home, as during that arduous campaign they adopted the traditions of the Fenrisian culture brought to them by the Varagir. The dark wisdom that the Varagir brought with them earned respect among those Terran legionnaires who wished to stand beside their genetic father, taking their place among the sons of Fenris. For this, they had to master new weapons and methods of warfare that Leman Russ so favoured. The new members of the Guard went through many great battles and often distinguished themselves in combat, forging their own sagas worthy of the Primarch. All Varagir were the foremost among the pack and marked by the Primarch himself, becoming the wolves of his personal pack and gifted with an enormous beast pelt adorning their armour. For a warrior of the 6th Legion, accepting this honour was more than just being in the shadow of the Wolf King and laying down one's life for him. For them, joining the Varagir meant that for a time they missed the opportunity to lead their brothers into battle, watching as others fought while they stood beside the Primarch and observed the bloodshed, seeking no glory and killing only on their lord's command. However, such cold fury could not be contained forever, and as soon as the king gave the order, the Varagir struck the enemy like a bolt of lightning. The attack of Russ's guard, clad in armour and the pelts of mighty beast wanderers, often instilled terror in the enemy when they saw these warriors, driven by superhuman strength and inhuman rage, lightning-fast killing their foes, dealing fatal blows before the opponents could swing their blades. However, like many warbands of the past, the Varagirs, though loyal and devoted to the Wolf King, constantly competed amongst themselves, striving to present Russ with the most valuable trophies or kill as many dangerous adversaries as possible, and bathe in their blood to make their saga worthy of recitation by the Skalds. 7th Legion Imperial Fist's elite unit Huskarls. The Huskarls were an elite unit of Terminators from the 7th Legion during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, in addition to being the personal guard of Primarch Rogel Dawn. The first Huskarls were among the legionnaires created after Dawn took command of the Legion. The Huskarls were the first to swear an oath of loyalty to him, and their names were the first to be engraved on the walls of the Temple of Oaths. Unlike their other brothers, the Huskarls wore black cataphracti pattern armour with yellow pauldrons, instead of the fully yellow armor. The first commander of the Hussars was Captain Arkad, nicknamed the Last of the First, who led Rogel Dawn's honor guard into battle until the Battle of Pluto. There he fell at the hand of Alfarius, protecting his Primarch from a mortal strike by the traitor. The next commander of the Hussars was Sergeant Castoris, who was Arkad's deputy and took his name, thereby honoring the valor and sense of duty of his former commander. The surviving Hussars accompanied Dawn everywhere during the final years of the Horus heresy. A significant contingent of the honor guard went with their Primarch aboard the Vengeful Spirit to confront the traitor Horus. It is unknown whether any of these valiant warriors survived the boarding operation, as there are no subsequent records of the Hussars, the 8th Legion, Night Lords, elite unit Atramenta. During the Great Crusade, none could match the Night Lords in using fear as a weapon of mass destruction. Even before the treacherous massacre on Istvan V, members of the 8th Legion had fully dedicated themselves to mastering the arts of terror and ferocious purges, and were essentially renegades, though not officially regarded as such. At the forefront of this legion of assassins, cutthroats and torturers stood the Atramenta, the elite of the legion, selected personally by the Primarch from among ordinary legionnaires who demonstrated incredible ferocity and brutality on the battlefield. Each Atramenta had a notorious reputation both within and outside their legion. Clad in Cataphractii Terminator armor and armed with lightning claws, the Atramenta became the core of the Legion's first company, answering only to their Primarch and their captain, Sevatar. One of the key battles involving the Atramenta was the assault on the flagship of the Dark Angels, the Invincible Reason, in which 100 Terminators from this formation took part. However, the legionaries of the first offered brutal resistance, and the Night Lords were forced to retreat. The Atramenta suffered heavy losses, and after Sevatar's death they nearly ceased to exist, for they refused to follow anyone else. One of the Atramenta later stated that none but Sevatar could lead them, for he was the one who truly forged the Brotherhood of the Atramentar. The 9th Legion Blood Angels elite unit, Sanguinary Guard. Like the Deathwing, the Sanguinary Guard, also known as the 9th or the Burning Ones, due to their fervent loyalty to their Primarch, remains an active unit within the Blood Angels chapter to this day, their roots tracing back to long-forgotten times. Being the elite of the 9th Legion's first sphere, the members of the Sanguinary Guard were veterans of the Legion and vigilant protectors of their Primarch. Like all members of the first sphere, the legionaries of the Sanguinary Guard discarded their names and ranks, adopting the new title of Seraphim, to depersonalize themselves and focus on protecting the Great Angel, relentlessly and mercilessly eliminating his enemies. The Guard followed their champion for a long time, until they all fell aboard the Vengeful Spirit, defending Sanguinius. However, foreseeing such a sorrowful end, Sanguinius commanded his herald and the commander of the Sanguinary Guard, Ascalon, to remain on Terra so that, in the event of the Primarch's defeat, his honor guard could continue to exist. With a heavy heart, Ascalon accepted his genetic father's decision, for he understood that he could not jeopardize the obligations entrusted to him. Sanguinius fell, as did his guard, which, through the efforts of Ascalon, was resurrected not only in the ranks of the Blood Angels, but also in all their successor chapters. 10th Legion Iron Hands Elite Unit Morlocks. The Morlocks, elite Terminators of the Iron Hands Legion, served as the honor guard of the 10th Legion for a long time and were simultaneously the blood-drenched spearhead that the 10th thrust into the hearts of their enemies. All members of this elite formation were part of the clan Averni and were considered by the other Iron Hands to be the Legion's most lethal and experienced warriors. They received such a name for their terrifying appearance, which instilled as much horror in ordinary mortals as the predators of the same name living in the icy tundras of Medusa. For a long time, the Morlocks stood guard on the flagship of Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands, while the most powerful among them were honoured to guard the gates of the Primarch's inner sanctum, located in the Anvilarium, a grand hall where the legionaries planned their operations. Throughout their history, the Morlocks had only one commander, First Captain Gabriel Santar, who was also a member of Clan Averni. With the onset of the Horus heresy before the massacre at the landing site, the Morlocks first encountered the Astartes, members of the brother chapter of the Emperor's Children. Their first battle occurred on Manas's flagship when he refused to side with the War Master, after which Fulgrim gave the signal to his guard, who in seconds beheaded 10 of Ferris's bodyguards from among the Morlocks. Even First Captain Santar nearly perished in that battle, receiving a mortal wound from Julius Caesoron. This battle can be considered the beginning of the end for the elite warriors of the Iron Hands, as shortly thereafter they all fell alongside their Primarch on Istvan V, killed by Fulgrim and his Phoenix Guard. Only a few Morlocks managed to survive this dreadful battle. This unit emerged after the reuniting of the War Dogs in their war with their Primarch Angron, who began instilling new Syrian values into his legion, making it even more brutal and bloodthirsty. The culture of New Syrian gladiators quickly spread within the legion, and now every disagreement between brothers was resolved in bloody skirmishes, the victors of which received approval from Angron and the entire legion. This practice led to high-ranking legionaries being challenged by other World Eaters for the right to command a detachment or an entire company. These duels always ended with the death of one of the participants, and while battles for command positions did not occur frequently, the fights for the right to be one of Angron's close aides were constant. The elite unit of the World Eaters consisted of only 12 Astartes, each of whom had numerous victories in the Legion's fighting pits. In the event of the death of one of the World Eaters in a skirmish with the enemy, a competition was held within the Legion for his place among all the warriors of Angron, who considered themselves worthy to take the place of one of the chosen. However, the destructive influence of the Butcher's Nails slowly but surely eroded the Primarch's mind, and Angron increasingly paid less attention to the warriors who were once his pride. The Primarch began to ignore them, no matter where he went, whether to a council or to battle, and almost stopped fighting alongside them altogether. Encased in the heavy armour of the cataphracti pattern, the Butcher's Nails made it impossible for the Devourers to keep pace with their liege, leading them to lose control over their minds and transforming them from an honourable guard into a rabble of bloodthirsty killers. The warriors, who had spent centuries learning to swallow their pride, still pretended that the Primarch they had sworn to protect was proud of them. In reality, they irritated Angron more than they earned his pride. The very concept of these protectors began to disgust him, as their existence implied that in theory he genuinely needed them. However, in practice, no Astartes could match the Primarch in the heat of battle. Undoubtedly, he once appreciated their intentions, as the Devourers diligently sought to honour their genetic father and demonstrate their respect by imitating his gladiatorial origins. The constant neglect of his guard and his excessive lust for blood had led the Devourers to consistently fall behind, but Angron did not see this as his own fault. Instead, he viewed the lagging of his bodyguards as their failure. Ironically, with the onset of the Horus heresy, membership in the Guard, for which there were constant battles, was no longer considered prestigious and became a mark of disgrace. The Devourers were no longer the mightiest fighters of their legion, and most veterans of the 12th did not even consider joining them. Additionally, warriors like Khan laughed at the very idea of joining the Devourers. The end of the Guard's existence could be considered the duel between one of the Devourers and Apothecary Kregos, who defeated the Guard. Instead of taking his place, he only humiliated the warrior by carving his name into his armour and then spared him. After the end of the Horus heresy, the remaining Devourers either formed their own warbands worshipping Khorne or joined other Lords of Chaos as their champions. The 13th Legion, the Ultramarines, an elite unit known as the Invictari, existed outside the Ultramarines' command chain as they answered only to the Primarch or his tetrarchs. Unlike the Golden Keshig, the Invictari did not wear Terminator armour, but standard armour. The Invictarii were the living embodiment of their Primarch's will, and every element of their equipment or weaponry reflected their status. The power axes of the Invictarii were ancient symbols of power on Macragge, as millennia ago such weapons were used by the herald kings of this planet. The weapons of the Invictarii were not only symbols of their status, but were also used to dispense justice to anyone who dared challenge the will of Guilliman. Meanwhile, the gilded shields were symbols of deterring anarchy and disorder which were beginning to engulf the galaxy. Each Invictarii was an experienced warrior who had accomplished many feats and was frequently honoured by the command. Initially, the Invictarii were few and merely maintained order within the domain of the Ultramarines. However, as the territories under Macragge's control expanded, so did the number of Invictarii, who now served not only as defenders and arbitrators, but also as the honour guard of the Tetrarchs, accompanying them both in battle and during peacetime. Over time, the best of this honour guard occupied high command positions within the Legion, as they were not only excellent fighters but also good leaders and politicians. The exact number of Invictarii is unknown, but according to available records, Tetrarch Aminthos alone had several thousand warriors at his disposal who maintained order on the worlds around IAX, while the guard of Tetrarch Alamiad comprised only 100 Invictarii, partly because his dominions housed many Mechanicum troops who managed any unrest on their own and did not require additional assistance. Additionally, small detachments of Invictarii were scattered throughout the Legion, honing their combat skills and sometimes taking command at various sections of the front. The 14th Legion, Death Guard, Elite Unit, Death Shroud. The members of the Death Shroud were among the most revered warriors in the Legion. Unlike many other Honour Guard units, the Death Shroud was cloaked in an aura of mystery, as each warrior was secretly and personally chosen by the Primarch, who constantly monitored the deeds of his sons. The chosen legionnaire had to renounce his name and origins and swear an oath to keep his past a secret. After this, every new member of the Death Shroud was recorded in the Legion's annals as dead or missing, to dispel any suspicions about their true identity, and then hid their face under a deep hood. The names of the ostensibly deceased Astartes remained unknown to anyone except their genetic father. Clad in intricately crafted cataphractii pattern Terminator armour and armed with a power scythe known as the Reaper, each member of the Death Shroud followed the Primarch everywhere. They constantly accompanied Mortarion, and at least 2 members of his honour guard never strayed more than 49 paces from their father. The very presence of the Death Shroud was a terrifying sight, for when they stood beside Mortarion they resembled statues that would suddenly come to life when the Primarch moved. In battle, they were even more terrifying, as no matter the resistance, the warriors of the Death Shroud steadily advanced towards the enemy as if they were not living beings but automatons of the Legio Cybernetica. During battles, the Death Shroud rarely acted as the Primarch's bodyguards, as he preferred to use them as breakthrough troops at the most challenging parts of the front. After the fall of Mortarion into the abyss of treachery and the defeat of the traitors, he continues to recruit new members of the Death Guard in the same manner as before his transformation into a demon prince. The role of these terrifying warriors has remained nearly unchanged. However, they now serve as the honour guard not only of the Primarch but also of some of the Lords of Chaos. Each member of the Sekhmet was a revered veteran of his legion and belonged to the Scarab Occult, the elite First Fellowship commanded by Captain Carrimond. Proud and extraordinarily devoted, these warriors were not only magnificent fighters, but also powerful sorcerers, capable of summoning forces so powerful that mere mortal psychers could not even imagine. With truly terrifying power, each member of the Sekhmet theoretically could conquer an entire world alone, for in battle each could simply send his familiar into enemy shelters to burn the foe with invisible fire or smite him with phantom hammers. In the days preceding the Council of Nicaea, when the Legion was faced with an opponent so powerful that even Magnus the Red deemed his intervention necessary, it was the Terminators of Sekhmet who secured the balance of power, effectively becoming the catalyst for the psychic might of the Crimson King. No enemy, no matter how powerful, could withstand the onslaught of Magnus's guard. Under the blows of their power, Kopeshis, axes and psychic forces, numerous unspeakable horrors, that terrorized the galaxy fell, and even the powerful Eldar sorcerers could not endure the assault of the Sekhmet Terminators. Such effectiveness was achieved through numerous training sessions and the legionaries' ability to mentally transcend their physical and emotional capabilities. Achieving absolute calm and discipline, the members of Sekhmet executed any orders given by their captains or Primarchs immediately. This level of discipline was noted more than once by other Primarchs who had the fortune to see the Sekhmet Terminators in battle. However, not all admired their abilities. The Primarch of the White Scars noted that the warriors behaved like cybernetic automatons. Ferrus Manus held a similar opinion, but knowing how the Iron Hands revered technology and cybernetic enhancements, some legionaries of the Thousand Sons took it as a compliment. Leman Russ had a low opinion of the Terminators as well, believing that the Sekhmet had no fighting spirit due to their silent and methodical extermination of all living things. After the betrayal of Magnus and the end of the Horus heresy, the Sekhmet as such ceased to exist, transforming from powerful and noble warriors into soulless armors controlled by sorcerers. The Justerin Terminators were the pride of their legion and one of the two specialized units of the First Company of the Sons of Horus. Clad in black Cataphractii-pattern Terminator armor, and armed with Corswan power axes and Phobos-pattern combi melters, the Justerin followed their captain, spreading the light of the Imperial truth throughout the galaxy. They were among the first Astartes to fully embrace the use of dreadnought tactical armor, abandoning the simple power armor. Being at the tip of their legion's spear, they quite often encountered intense resistance, and at times only their armor allowed them to survive. The Justerin were favored by Horus, and bore the name of one of the most powerful Chthonian gangs. After the fall of the War Master, his chosen ones followed him unconditionally, protecting their father at all costs. However, during the Siege of Terra, the Justerin suffered enormous losses. In a failed attempt to storm the Saturnine Gate, most of the First Company's elite was destroyed by Loyalists. After the death of Horus and the founding of the Black Legion, the Justerin were replaced by the Weeping Ones, and only a small contingent of them still fights for their former captain, now a champion of the Dark Gods. The 17th Legion, Word-Bearer's elite unit Gal Vorbak. Initially, the members of the Gal Vorbak were ordinary Astartes from the Order of the Serrated Sun. They were the first who set off on a pilgrimage into the Eye of Terror. There, all the members of the Order were killed by demons. However, after a while they returned to the world of the living, finding out that the other people on the ship had been slain and that their cruiser had been significantly damaged. During the 7-month journey back from the Eye of Terror, the members of the Serrated Sun began killing each other to survive, quenching their thirst with the blood of their fallen comrades and eating the flesh of fallen mortal servants of the Legion. Upon their return, Lorgar elevated the pilgrims, renaming the Order of the Serrated Sun to Gal Vorbak, or Blessed Sons in the native dialect of the Word-Bearer's homeworld. In the weeks following their return to reality, the members of the Gal Vorbak discovered that they constantly heard otherworldly voices, similar to those they had already heard during their journey. Yet their torment did not end there. Shortly before the battle on Istvan V, they began to change. Their armor began to merge with their flesh, and their helmets transformed into terrifying visages. To keep this hidden from their battle brothers, the warriors of the Gal Vorbak locked themselves in their quarters, claiming they needed to meditate, but in reality they only sought to hide from everyone and somehow ease the monstrous pain that constantly plagued them. After numerous mutations, they became the revered elite of the Legion and the living embodiment of Lorgar's ideals, though they still appeared as ordinary Astartes, but were far faster and stronger than any other space marine. The demonic form of the members of the Gal Vorbak manifested only during the massacre on Istvan V, where they, along with Lorgar, attacked Corvus Corax. Of all the troops that descended upon Istvan, only 5 legionaries survived, who after the battle returned to their normal Astartes form. After the battle, Gal Vorbak stood resolutely by their Primarch, fighting in the glory of chaos. They became the elite of their legion, transforming into Lorgar's most powerful warriors. Following the victory on Istvan, the crimson hue of Gal Vorbak's armor began to spread throughout the legion, as did the possession by demons. However, fortunately for the loyalists, the new possessed were much weaker than the initial members of Gal Vorbak, though they still posed significant threats. After numerous battles, the leader of Gal Vorbak, Argyll Tal, was the sole surviving member of this formation, which ceased to exist thereafter, as Argyll Tal received permission from his Primarch to create entirely new forces called the Vakra Jal. The Pyre Guard was established by Vulcan after he reunited with his legion on Nocturne. Its first members were the most experienced and resilient Terran legionaries who had survived the harshest battles of the early years of the Great Crusade. From the small number of suitable candidates, Vulcan formed his own honor guard, whose members became his closest entourage and advisors. Unlike the rest of the warriors of the 18th Legion, the members of the Pyre Guard were characteristically dissimilar to the stalwart salamanders. Like the dragons of Nocturne, the guardsmen were wild and untamable warriors whose rage burned like massive columns of fire. They were more like living volcanoes than disciplined legionaries, as they were always on the verge of erupting their wrath upon all around them. But despite their volatility, they were still selfless and outstanding warriors, whose skills eclipsed all other legionaries, being first and foremost Vulcan's tempered fighters. The members of the Pyre Guard could fight as a single unit or act solo, depending on the circumstances. Moreover, they possessed excellent leadership qualities, and in addition to their duties as bodyguards, each Pyre Guard commanded one of the Salamander's orders. The number of Pyre Guards in active service always equaled 7, as this number held significant ritual importance for the inhabitants of Nocturne. All 7 served the Legion and the Emperor with honor, but their fate, like that of many members of the elite units of the loyal legions, was unenviable. After the battle on Istvan V, like their Morlock brothers from the 10th Legion, virtually all members of the Burial Guard were killed, with only 3 guardsmen, including their leader Artellum Meon, managing to survive. The 19th Legion, the Raven Guard, elite unit, Shadow Wardens. Like members of certain formations of the Astartes Honor Guard, the warriors of the Shadow Wardens fought alongside their Primarch, still being mere humans. The first members of the Wardens were Corax's bodyguards during his uprising on Lycius. Despite the Primarch's opposition, his comrades insisted that bodyguards watch over him, who could delay or eliminate assassins sent for Corvus if necessary. After brief arguments, the Primarch agreed, simultaneously calming his followers and providing himself with some form of protection. After reuniting with his legion, Corax elevated the bodyguards and formed them into an honor guard, which received the unofficial name Shadow Wardens. Rumor has it that the members of Corvus Corax's honor guard followed him everywhere like a shadow, and no one could escape their watchful gaze. Only the Primarch himself could avoid their presence, giving his sons reason to invent an ironic saying that he is the only one in the galaxy who can escape his own shadow if he wishes. Like other elite loyalist units, the Shadow Wardens suffered enormous losses during the Dropsite massacre, but some, including their leader Gerith Arendi, managed to survive. Shortly before the battle at Yarant, the heavily depleted Shadow Wardens were reorganized into the Black Guard, which after the Horus heresy became a full-fledged chapter of Space Marines. The 20th Legion, Alpha Legion, elite unit, Lernean Terminators. Few outside the 20th Legion knew of the existence of the Lernean Terminators, or, as they were called within the Legion, the Mauls of the Hydra, for they rarely left any clues or witnesses to their activities. Like the mythical Hydra, the elite Terminators of the Alpha Legion wiped out all life they could reach. Armed with power axes and Volkite blasters, the Lernean Terminators would isolate and annihilate the largest and most powerful enemy forces in mere seconds, leaving only rivers of blood after their attack, which would horrify incoming enemy reinforcements. The calculated and cold brutality of the Lernean Terminators led to their reputation spreading beyond the 20th Legion over time, and rumors of an unstoppable force eliminating humanity's enemies began to circulate among the Imperium's troops. Regarding their role as an honor guard, it is difficult to verify whether the Linnaean Terminators indeed fulfilled such a role, among other things.